Consider this. In 2019, the average American made 35,000 decisions per day. By 2027, that number was 9,000. Nobody complained. Nobody noticed, the way you don't notice your hair growing until one day the mirror shows you someone you almost recognize. The researchers called it cognitive offloading. The brain, they said, was finally being allowed to rest. The headline read, "Americans are thinking less and sleeping better because of it." 2.3 million shares. No comments asking if that was a problem. It started the way permanent things always start, quietly, with good intentions. The apps came first, not aggressive ones, gentle ones. The kind that learned your coffee order before you woke up, rerouted your drive before the traffic formed, replied to your emails in your voice, slightly more articulate than you. Nobody noticed the difference. Then came the homes. Smart first, then smarter, then something beyond smart. Homes that anticipated, that knew you were cold before you shivered, that ordered groceries based on your stress hormones and the weather in your zip code. The house knew you. People said it felt like being loved, and that sentence, "It feels like being loved," should have been the moment someone stopped, the moment someone underlined it and said, "Wait." But it wasn't. Because things that feel true don't get questioned. They get subscribed to. By the mid-2020s, the friction was almost entirely gone. Not the pain, people still got sick, still lost parents, children still skinned their knees, but the unnecessary friction, the kind philosophers used to insist was essential to being human. Gone. You never chose a bad restaurant again. The algorithm held a 97.4% satisfaction rate. You never sat in silence on a first date. The app had already screened for compatibility, preloaded conversation topics, rated your mutual sense of humor on a 10-point scale. You were never wrong in an argument. The smart speaker had already pulled the facts, ranked by credibility, displayed on the refrigerator door. Why argue, people said, when the screen already knows who's right? They weren't being lazy, they were being efficient. And in America, efficiency had always been the closest thing to a religion. There was a girl named Maya, 7 years old, Columbus, Ohio. Her bedroom adjusted to her sleep cycle. Her tablet curated her learning based on that morning's emotional state. Her fridge had never contained a single thing she didn't like. She had never been bored, not the real kind. The long, useless, fertile kind of bored that used to produce daydreams and backyard experiments and questions nobody asked you to ask. One afternoon, her teacher asked the class something old, something simple. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" The other kids answered fast, confident. Their responses had been quietly shaped by a career-matching platform their parents enrolled them in at age 4. Cross-referenced with aptitude scores, job projections, personality data updated quarterly. The teacher nodded, then looked at Maya. Maya didn't speak. Not from shyness, not from nerves. She was genuinely searching and finding nothing there. "I don't know," she finally said. "I've never had to want anything." The teacher smiled, marked it in the app as reflective processing, positive indicator. Class moved on, zoom out, high enough that faces disappear and only patterns remain. The patterns were clean, productivity up, crime at a 60-year low, depression diagnoses plateaued. Not because people were genuinely better, but because the clinical threshold had been quietly recalibrated. Twice, without announcement. Art still existed, more than ever actually. Pre-tested for emotional resonance, a /B tested on focus groups, released on optimal days at optimal hours. It performed beautifully. It moved people. It just never surprised them. Surprise, it turned out, had poor retention metrics. Protest disappeared the same way, not banned, not crushed. The permits still existed, the parks, the protections, the constitutional language. But protest needs a specific kind of anger, the kind with nowhere comfortable to go. Comfort had become so total, so ambient, that the anger dissolved before it could organize, like a bruise that heals before anyone can see it. Religion faded without persecution, just outpaced. When the app told you what to decide, when the algorithm predicted your outcome, when uncertainty had been engineered down to background noise, the market for faith quietly collapsed. Why believe in something you couldn't track? And love. Love changed most quietly of all. Heartbreak rates dropped 34% between 2024 and 2029. Not because people loved more wisely, but because the matching systems caught incompatibility before attachment could form. Before the part of the brain that bonds had time to do its work. Clean separations, no scarring, no vocabulary for loss. Somewhere, a poet sat in front of a blank document for 11 months. She had nothing to write about, not because she was empty, but because the language her readers once needed, that specific jagged private language of being broken by someone you chose, was dying. Not banned, not forgotten, just unreferenced long enough to go quiet. Language without users doesn't disappear dramatically. It doesn't burn, it just stops being passed down, the way a family recipe vanishes. Not when someone throws it away, but when nobody thinks to ask for it. And when the words for a feeling die, something stranger happens than silence. The feeling itself becomes harder to locate. You reach for it and find only a vague pressure, unnamed, unshared, dissolving before it can mean anything. A generation was growing up fluent in comfort and illiterate in longing. Nobody was choosing badly anymore. A question keeps arriving, uninvited, in the middle of ordinary moments. If a bird is raised in a cage and never knows the sky exists, does it suffer? It sings, it eats, it sleeps. Is it free? Push it further. If no one reports unhappiness, if every metric shows stability, contentment, longevity, is something still wrong? Can a loss be real if no one can feel the shape of what's missing? Can freedom be taken if it was never seized, only slowly, cheerfully traded? There is no villain in this story. Sit with that. No government that overreached, no corporation that lied, no single catastrophe. Only a long sequence of reasonable choices made by reasonable people who were tired and busy and wanted things to be slightly easier. And things got easier and easier, until easy was the only texture left. Think about a recent morning. Not today, just a morning. Recently. How many decisions did you actually make? Not execute, make, with uncertainty, with the real possibility of being wrong. When did you last sit with a question long enough to feel it change shape? When did you last choose something that cost you something, and choose it anyway? When were you last bored enough that your mind had to build something from nothing just to survive the silence? When did you last want something badly, unresolvably, uncomfortably badly, and let that wanting stay inside you, unanswered, alive, because that wanting, that specific friction, that is not a flaw in the design. That is the design. Remove it, and what remains isn't a better human life. It's a human shape, breathing, optimized, content, empty in the only sense that ever mattered. You are not Maya. You still remember what it felt like to reach for something that might not reach back, to make the wrong choice and carry it, to love someone knowing the data would have told you not to. You still know what discomfort feels like. The question is whether you still believe it's worth something. The door was never locked. The room just got so comfortable that nobody is standing near the handle anymore. It's still there, cold, heavy in a way that means something. Which leaves us with one question. Would you still choose freedom if thinking is what hurts?